Hello fellow humans! So today I'm just going to be going through some of the English texts that I've been forced to read or watch. So basically, if you don't know, which probably a large portion of you won't know because you're probably not just like Victorians, but here in Victoria we have this system called VCE, which is the Victorian Certificate of Education, and basically that is the last 2 years of secondary school, high school, so that is year 11 and 12, when we're no longer legally obligated to be at school. If you really want to know more about VCE, I suggest maybe go find a different video that explains it better, and perhaps in the future I will also do a video, but that day is not today. And what I really want to talk about is the fact that one of our mandatory units that we have to complete, so in year 11 and 12, we have to take English. In English, we have to study different texts, and with each different text, we kind of have to do something different. But I'm going to go through all of my year 11 and 12 VCE texts that we had to read. And not every school has to read and watch the same text. There's a list that is given to schools, and basically it's just like, oh, choose from here which ones you want, so I'm just going to be going through the ones that I had to do. Now, I didn't exactly do the best in year 11 English, and I think you'll come to figure out why, and I also don't have any of the physical copies of any of my English texts from year 11. You'll also figure out why in a second, and the reason for that is I hated each and every one of them. You know, it's not a good thing to say, but obviously I have come to realize that because I disliked these texts so much, it actually did hinder my ability to score well because I just loathed the texts. But we'll go through in order. First up is Frankenstein. You know, Frankenstein is Frankenstein. Everybody knows Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and as I stated previously, I did not like it. I think one of the things that I didn't like about it was too romantic, it was too flowery, it was too much. Like, that book could have been half its size had, you know, Mary Shelley not described everything in such amazing, great detail. I understand that's what the purpose of the text was, and it comes from the time period that it was written in, but honestly, I did not like it. I am glad that I got to read it once, so now that I actually fully understand the, you know, where the cultural aspect of Frankenstein comes from. Okay, our second text was Fred Diagua's The Longest Memory, and so basically this follows the life of I think it was a 1700s slave plantation where there is a slave owner and his slaves, and we follow the perspective mostly. It is like jumping between perspectives, but we mostly follow the perspective of this older slave who has survived through this a while, and he just sees his son beaten to death because he tries to escape the slave plantation. And so obviously the book deals with a lot of themes of racism, sexism, misogyny, and like rape and stuff. So it is definitely, if you want to read this book, search up the trigger warnings. There are quite a few. It's not like an enjoyable book in the sense where you're gonna read it and you're gonna be like, you know, mystery solved, this makes me feel so good. No, it's not a very satisfying book. It's not meant to make you feel satisfied. It's supposed to be confronting and a little bit uncomfortable. But that isn't the part that I didn't like about it. What I didn't like about it was the actual way it was written. It felt very ambiguous at times. It wasn't just me who was like often confused at what was going on in the story, because for each text we have like a test, and this test is called a SAC, which is School Assessed Coursework. And through this is where our like final grades are determined. On the day of the SAC, so we've been studying this text for like a couple weeks now, a bunch of us were like sitting in this group and we cannot agree on who a character is and what they do. So it was a little bit ambiguous and it wasn't like that clear-cut written, so it did leave a lot to interpretation, which is good because it usually makes a book engaging, but I just feel like combined with the themes of the book and the way that the book was written, it wasn't exactly written for an audience of year 11s, and we weren't really capable enough to understand what was going on. I just didn't like the book, again, for mostly writing reasons and not because it dealt with very real historical events. Our next text was Romeo and Juliet, and I didn't like it. There was nothing exactly relatable about the story. Obviously, it's written in a very different language to what we're used to now. The version that we use in our schools, it has the original text, and then it also has like a modern version of that same text, but it just doesn't hit the same. Also, I just felt like Romeo and Juliet, there wasn't really many like memorable things about it. Like, at least with Macbeth, there was like, "What? You egg?" And, you know, sometimes Shakespeare pulls out these like really weird, kooky lines, which were probably really normal at that time. But there was really nothing good about it. I didn't like any character except Benvolio. I like saying his name. I wasn't rooting for any of the characters. I thought they were all stupid. Yes, they're supposed to be children, but why are children doing this? It's all just all around really weird. I did not like it. And I don't really think much else needs to be said about that. But the accompanying text, so these two were a comparison. The accompanying text was the Footloose film, not the new one, the original version. I cannot for the life of me remember when that came out. I think it was 1970 something. I don't know. Songs are bangers. Didn't like anything else about the movie though. Again, I just didn't think that it had very many like memorable quotes to make it worthwhile. I also didn't exactly like the characters all that much. Like, yeah, they were all right. Honestly, off the top of my head, I don't even know who the characters were. Like, I know like 3 or 4 of them, but like if I had to name them, not exactly. I didn't like it, and I don't think that I really can explain more than that. And now we're going to move on to year 12 texts, which are significantly better. First text of this year, I'm honestly not going to take that much time on it because that was Like a House on Fire, which is by an Australian author. I don't even remember her name, and I also hated this text. Basically, the whole premise, it's actually a collection of short stories that are compiled into one book, and the name Like a House on Fire comes from one of the short stories in it, and I disliked every one of the short stories that we read. We only read 3 of them, and it's just really boring because the whole purpose of these stories is to show the ordinary life. You know, it's ordinary Australian life. It just connects to the audience, but it didn't connect to me because I like a very busy, fast-paced, moving, action-filled book, and that just wasn't my taste. So moving on, we have Station 11. Now, I really enjoyed this book. This is one of the books that I think I will probably still be reading like 5-10 years from now. I'll kind of read out the blurb, and it's like, one snowy night in Toronto, famous actor Arthur Leander dies on stage whilst performing the role of a lifetime. That same evening, a deadly virus touches down in North America. The world will never be the same again. 20 years later, Kirsten, an actress in the Travelling Symphony, performs Shakespeare in the settlements that have grown up since the collapse. But then her newly hopeful world is threatened. If civilization was lost, what would you preserve? And how far would you go to protect it? And I think that basically, obviously, this is a blurb, so it very nicely encompasses what happens in the story. So there is a deadly pandemic called the Georgia flu, and that lands in North America, and that's basically where we start the story, but it's all over the world, and it kills 99.99% of the population. And let me tell you, reading this book at the start of 2022, right after 2 years of rigorous lockdowns, it was kind of scary in a sense because this basically deals with a post-pandemic world, but at the same time, it made the book a lot more relatable, and I'm not sure if I would have enjoyed this book as much like 5 years ago. First of all, it is a non-linear narrative, so it jumps backwards and forwards, and it jumps around with different characters. You follow several different characters, but it's really interesting to see how the threads of the lives of different characters actually just connect to one another. And it's not like most other like post-apocalyptic, post-lapsarian or dystopian novels. It focuses a lot less on the survival aspect of living in a post-apocalyptic world, and it more so focuses on human relationships, human connectivity, and human civilization, the survival of civilization through individuals, through art, through beauty. And I think that's just like a really wonderfully written novel. I just realized that I haven't told you who wrote it, and this is by Emily St. John Mandel. I really enjoyed it, obviously, as you can tell, but I just want to go into like a little bit of a spoilery review, so just skip to the next chapter on this video if you don't want to listen to the spoilers of this, because I highly recommend, if you haven't read this, read it. I want to go through like certain parts of this book which I found like they almost induced tears, because they felt so like real to me at that time where we were just coming out of one of our worst lockdowns. You know, Melbourne, the most locked down city in the world. There is the incomplete list, which is just the anaphora of things that there are no more of, and it's just that no more flight, no more looking down from 30,000 feet and imagining the lives lit up by those lights at that moment. No more airplanes. And I felt like that really hit, because obviously we had made travel plans. We were planning to travel overseas during the time that COVID lockdowns were a thing, and obviously air travel was restricted and everything, and it just felt like, whew, like it hit hard. Obviously, I am really glad that what we had with the COVID pandemic wasn't as bad as this, and I also acknowledge that I come from a very privileged place where all I can complain about is not being able to fly on airplanes when people had those close to them pass away. But I feel like in terms of like reader engagement, this engaged me, and understanding that I did live in Australia at the time of this lockdown, and I had nothing truly horrifying happen to anyone I know that I love, or me. But I still just want to focus on just like the little things that made me tear up. So chapter 42, this one also hit really hard. I'm pretty sure I put the book down at this point and actually started crying, because wow. So this is when Clark is at the Seven City Airport terminal, and he starts realizing that this is actually going to be a moment in life where there's going to be a before and after. I know that's a Jeevan quote, but oh well. He realizes the last time that he's going to have the memories of this, like he's never going to do these things again. And it basically follows the lines of, the last time I ate an ice cream cone in a park in the sunlight. The last time I danced in a club. The last time I saw a moving bus. The last time I boarded an airplane that hadn't been repurposed as living quarters. An airplane that actually took off. The last time I ate an orange. You know, it's obviously huge things, like huge marvels of what human civilization was able to accomplish. Moving buses, airplanes that could take you from one side of the world to the other, or like phones that could connect you from one thing to the other. And obviously, the most relatable bit about this was, knew as I was in lockdown that eventually we'd get out of it. But a lot of those things were like last times. Last time I went to school on a car. Last time I went shopping. Last time I actually bought something with my own hands. Last time, yeah, I boarded an airplane. And I think one of the things that hits hardest about this sentence is not that he's just like, you know, last time I ate an ice cream cone in a park in the sunlight. Like, there's certain specific things that we do so often that we don't realize would be taken away from us if we didn't do them. But then the last line, the last time I ate an orange. And that is a real tearjerker for me, because it's such a simple thing to eat an orange, but then you also realize everything that comes with the orange, that this orange wasn't grown in my backyard. This orange was grown halfway across the world. Somebody picked it, somebody cleaned it, processed it, and it was flown on an airplane most probably. Somebody drove the truck to transport it to my local grocery store, and somebody set it up in the local grocery store, and I went and bought it then. And there's just so much that goes into getting one little orange for me And to me that felt like I realized the impact of the world just stopping, you know? Like the world stopped, and when we were in lockdown we realized it because things changed a lot, but realizing the very little changes that we take for granted that stopped when COVID came around, that was honestly pretty emotional. But I have had enough to say about this, so I really have to move on before I make this video like 3 hours long. The next text is Ransom by David Malouf, and this is basically a reimagining of Homer's Iliad. And at the point where Achilles drags around Hector's dead body for 11 days, that is where we start off this novel, 11 days into Achilles absolutely grief-stricken over the death of Patroclus, and he's just dragging around Hector's body. And then we end this book pretty much 24 hours later on the next morning, and a lot happens. Like, this is 24 hours. Honestly, when I started reading this book, it was really difficult to read. This whole section 1 was actual hell, and I read this while I was on a road trip, which is arguably the easiest time to read a book because you have nothing else to do really. But wow, was it really difficult. Like, this is all of section 1, and this whole section is just Achilles sitting on a beach and reflecting. He's reflecting on his past, he's reflecting on his current state of mind, and he is doing absolutely nothing at all. Maybe he takes like 2 steps in this entire like 30-page section, but there isn't a lot of movement, there isn't a lot of action. It's a lot of inner reflective thoughts, which isn't exactly how the rest of the novel is, but is really difficult to read through that first bit. So if you want to pick up this story, you definitely want to know where it's beginning and what the purpose of this book is, because otherwise you're literally not going to make it past the first section and you're going to be like, damn, I gotta put this book down. But after that, after I actually read the full first section and then I got into the rest of the book, I actually really enjoyed this book. And part of that I think might just be because I convinced myself that I was going to like this book, or, you know, there was no other or. And that actually really worked out in my favor because I got significantly better marks with this book now knowing that I liked it. Do give this a read. It definitely isn't a book for everyone, but just try it. I understand that a lot of people aren't gonna like this, and it's really not a lot of people's taste. The language is really flowery at the start, and it gets a bit better, but other than that, you should definitely read it. And our second text for this topic, which was the comparison with Ransom, was The Queen, Stephen Frears' The Queen, 2006 film. And I really like that movie. I don't know if it's like a particularly enjoyable movie, but wow, I love the quotes. There are whole sections, actually I could probably quote the whole movie with only like about 20% error rate, but I have memorized whole sections of that movie and it is so much fun. So just give it a casual watch. It's like not a bad movie, but I don't think it's like a particularly interesting movie. That also only follows about like a week of the Queen's life back in 1997 following Diana's death. You're probably not going to watch the movie for its quotes, but I love reciting the quotes, so that might, you know, incentivize some of you to watch the movie. Well, that is all for my very long, excessive rants about some of these, but I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope you're having a good day. I hope you continue to have a good day, and I will see you next time.